Hello there. This is my showcase for my single player map for Quake, the Temple. This map is heavily inspired on Greco-roman-style temples. I decided to make this a temple kind of for Poseidon and kind of devolve into telling the story of the Minotaur. And I used texturing and whatnot and later on layout to help convey this loose narrative of this place. There's a lot of stone and marble textures and a lot of textures that have Greco-Roman style design elements like these ones on the wall. As the player ventures further into the temple, the textures slowly start to get browner as the nature of this temple gets a little more sinister. This is the first room where the pacing really kind of starts to pick up since there's so much going on. You have the two scrags throwing projectiles at you, flying around, and then you have the two grunts on the balcony as well as the one on the ground firing projectiles at you. However, it kind of does slow down after this room because once you kill them all, you have the chance to take some time and explore the room and look at all the details, look at the statue, and kind of take in the narrative of this room of being kind of a worship space to the god Poseidon. The room following this one also has no enemies, kind of also serving as a rest area and respite before continuing on with the level. It also allows the player to get up onto this balcony where the gold key is stored. Some more views of the statue and some of the textures that are around the top of the ceiling. Using predominantly stone textures, be it these stone bricks or just stony rock further on in the level, even for these benches and things, this marbly stone helps maintain the immersion of this, making it feel like a cohesive place. Even though the textures are moving from a lighter white pristine feel from the beginning of the entrance to this dark grittier one of the dungeon here, it still feels like the same place because they're all these stone textures and relatively similar patterns. They don't differ from each other too much besides from the color palette. This dungeon area is where the pacing kind of starts to pick back up after the respite of the rest area, but just before this. It serves as a little step before the action of the labyrinth. Even though when you enter this area of the labyrinth, you aren't really greeted with a lot of enemies at first, the encounters here tend to build up a little quicker, so having that kind of warm-up of the dungeon kind of helps set the scene for the encounters in this room. This little smaller space that is being shot into right now that has these zombies in it kind of serves as a little break before really entering the maze, especially since the jump puzzle takes a little bit of time and there really aren't many enemies attacking you while you're doing that puzzle. There's a lot of spaces in the labyrinth that can be explored, which kind of creates this almost emergent pacing where the player could really go forward and fight through all these encounters in this space, but then also take some time to rest while they're exploring. The exploration kind of serves as a bit of a break from all these fights and encounters. And if the player does take that time to explore, there are two secrets in this area that the player would be rewarded with. The one was just one that we just passed with that key. If the player gets to that one, they are rewarded with the lightning gun, which they can use in the encounters in this labyrinth, as well as in the boss fight at the end. There is also a silver key hidden there as well. It is one of 3 silver keys in this room. I put 3 keys in this area because one common piece of feedback that I got about this room was that players didn't feel like they completed going through this entire area with those 2 other doors still being closed, and they wanted to be able to open those before leaving this area via the elevator that is in that room. So I placed 2 other keys that the players could find, and it would be kind of a reward for exploring this room, and it'd give them the opportunity to open those doors and find out what is there instead of having to walk all the way around the maze, to find the door and then not be able to open the door in the end. I added a trigger message that whenever the player walks through the door they opened with a silver key, it lets them know that they no longer have a silver key, so they aren't confused about not being able to open the other doors despite having gotten the silver key before. The layout of this map was something that was taken into account, especially with this maze aspect of the map. I wanted to make sure there was a lot of kinks and bends in the path so as to not have these really long sightlines, as well as smaller rooms like this that have more enemies, as well as pickups that add more varied encounters to this maze, as well as adding more varied spaces to this maze rather than it just being a collection of long pathways with kinks and bends. Players do have to backtrack through the maze in order to get out and find those extra keys. However, having the message display when they use the key that they no longer have the key, I think, helped give them a sense of purpose in backtracking. Like here, if they found the secret before entering the maze, they know where an extra key is and can go back to that spot and backtrack with a purpose rather than just aimlessly backtracking, since that's the only way to go. In order to keep players from backtracking, quote unquote, through the maze and walking up behind enemies which are facing the opposite direction, I added triggers going in the opposite direction if the player were to go through the maze, quote unquote, backwards, that turns the enemies to look at them and fight them head on rather than letting the player sneak up behind them. Another thing I utilized to help enhance the immersion of this map were statues like this one. This statue of a Minotaur's head, as well as the Poseidon statue in the worship room, are just examples of these. They help to further convey the narrative of this map as being kind of a temple for Poseidon and then devolving into this Minotaur's labyrinth. There are a lot of triggers used in this maze in order to make it feel like the enemies are indeed coming after the player in this place rather than them being static, just waiting for the player to come upon them. This is the elevator at the middle of the maze that brings the player back up to this worship area. Having the player return to this area for the final fight kind of adds engagement and gets the player thinking about this space and how it's connected. Having quad damage be the reward for finding that second secret also kind of adds to the fun of this level. As you can see, it made fighting the Shambler, the boss fight at the end, a lot more interesting. And that is it for the walkthrough of this level. Thank you for watching.